Welcome to Top to Bottom Male Romance Podcast, where we celebrate all things male romance. I'm Jessica.
And I'm Markie.
And this is our November bottom episode.
Yes. As always, before we get started, I do need to remind you we do have reader groups. We have one on Goodreads and one on Facebook. You can jump in at any time and talk to us about our bottom pick that we're reading for the month, recommend a good series you'd like us to pick up, talk about a cool TV show or comic book that you picked up recently that you enjoy, just anything related to romance or general silliness. We're always happy to hear from you. We also have a Patreon. Our patrons get inside information about any upcoming interviews that we have and get a chance to submit questions to said interview person. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out, make sure you do so.
And if you haven't done so yet, make sure you rate us on whatever it is you listen to us on. It helps other people find us too.
Woo! We've got a lot of goodies this episode, a lot of fun stuff. But before we start, I wanted to talk about this cool podcast that I found out about between recording episodes. It's called Dragon's Reign. It's a podcast. But what's neat about this podcast is that it's a romance fiction podcast. So the author, Wraith Rain, she reads an episode at a time of her story, which is a dragon shifter, like romance. And the premise is that there's 8 dragon shifters rule the world, but an ordinary human, Caden Bryce, becomes the 9th, destined to be mate of one of the 8. So basically, it's like a harem kind of situation. So I think they're all kind of vying to be his mate, and there's dragon shifters, and it looks really cool. And the art for it is like really nice. That's what caught my initial attention, is when I went to go check it out. Like the banner for it has these very, very hot men like illustrated on there. And like, I guess one of the main dragon dudes is like got long black hair and a goatee, and he's all like muscly. And I was like, I would totally gobble this up. This is fantastic. But it's really interesting. I'll make sure to put the links in our show notes so you guys can go check it out. But the episodes are like 30, 40 minutes long. So a good chunk of content per episode, and it's an ongoing kind of thing. So definitely worth looking into.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I love story-based podcasts. I don't have a lot of them I've listened to, but like I did Welcome to Night Vale for a really long time, and some of the offshoots of that as well. And man, love me a good story podcast. And romance, how perfect.
You know, I need to go see if there's more. I'm sure there has to be more than just this one that's out there. This has to be like one of those hidden gem kind of things. And if it's not, it certainly needs to be. Like, I would love to get some good episodic fiction, romance fiction podcasts I could just sink my teeth into. So if you guys know of any, please let us know, because I'm going to start this one, and I'm sure I'm going to need like 1,000 more to gobble up after I get through the episodes that are out. So yes, please tell us if there's more.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready to dive into our side banana, which was a little bit different this month?
I am ready. So tell me how your nano went, Jess.
I think I mentioned in the top episode that what spurred me to get on the Nano bandwagon this year was a post from Will Knaus from the Big Gay Fiction podcast. And, you know, I jumped in. I was like, yeah, let's be buddies, Will. And then I set up my project, and I was like all gung-ho, and I was ready to do this thing. I talked to several people, you know, got super stoked about it. You know, I had several friends that were very excited that I was finally going to write something and put it out there. And yeah, so it was rough for me. I didn't get very far. I sat down on day one, which I had every intention of just like, I don't care what I write, let's just write. And I got stuck. I was like one paragraph in and it was garbage, and I was mad at it, and I hated everything about it, and then ended up writing something else that night. Tried again to day 2. I ended up journaling instead. So I wrote something then. And then day 3, I was like, which was my birthday, I ended up saying, fuck it, I'm going to work on this other creative project that's not writing at all, but it's something I've been needing to get to. So Will had a very similar month to me, not necessarily the exact same path. They had a really great episode of Big Gay Author podcast where they were talking about like the attainable goals and stuff, and like changing your behaviors and stackable behaviors and stuff. I super recommend listening to that if you haven't done it. Really, really awesome, no matter if you have been successful with writing in Nano or if you weren't, or even if you're wanting to just try to develop a creative habit of any kind. Really a solid episode to listen to. So enough about my failure. How about you?
I was going to say that episode that you're talking about, I actually turned it on while I was driving home from the day job. I was about to hit Kroger and like get about my day. So I started it and I ended up sitting in my car and listening to it because it kind of rejuvenated me, I guess. It was just, it's one of those, I think I just needed them to say like, hey, this is how people's minds work. And like, you need to be nice to yourself. You need to set goals that are attainable. And they talk about comparinitis a lot, which is my worst fucking enemy, is that exact thing. So every time they bring up comparinitis and they're like, hey, don't compare yourself to others, you're doing a good job, I'm like, I am, thank you. Like, I just need a weekly pep talk from them, apparently. And that's just what gets me through my life. So that's how that works. My Nano has, well, I cheated. So first off, elephant in the room.
Okay, that's not cheating. First of all, fuck you. That's not cheating.
I started with 10 or 11,000 words into the project.
It's not what it's. Okay, that's fine, but you still had a habit of writing every day. I think you're full of shit, and this is not cheating. Anyways, continue.
Okay, well, anyway, I did my best to stay on top of my word count. It didn't really happen, though. I got to 1,400 words a day when I could write, but there were a couple days that just didn't happen. Tonight being one of them. I'm not writing tonight. We're recording our podcast, and when I'm done, I'm going to drink some wine and go to sleep. Like, sometimes this shit doesn't happen. So I'm still trucking. I'm still working hard. I've gotten a huge chunk of my story done, but I'm not going to hit 50,000 words by the end of the month. I've got all of December to wrap up what the hell I'm doing. So I guess we both kind of just failed this, Nano, but you know what? It was still fun.
I don't think either one of us failed, actually. I think that it was an interesting experiment, and you have made a lot of developments on your story, and you kind of went over some bumps in the road and kind of come over the other side of it, and you're just kind of trucking at it. Mm-hmm. And Will said something about, I don't know why I expected to just all of a sudden sit down and write, 1,600 words a day when I haven't done anything to change my habits from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. I'm not 100% that, writing is necessarily my future as far as like actually being a published author. It'd be very, very cool if it was. I have a lot of other stuff on my plate, and that's cool. It's fine. It's not exactly what I had in mind, but it might even be better for me. And I think that this Nano has kind of pointed me in that direction. Mm-hmm. And it's still a very booky direction. And I don't know, I think that it was absolutely a learning experience for both of us.
Yeah. I can agree with that.
So no failure. This isn't about failure. This is about a challenge and learning stuff about yourself and your own abilities and what you are good with and what you still need work on. This isn't necessarily about winning the month. However, I'm very, very proud of my author friends that have won the month. It's been really cool to see those certificates popping up on Facebook.
Yeah. If you started Nano and didn't finish like us, or if you made it all the way to the end, you are a badass and we love you.
Yes.
So do you want to talk about our bottom?
Oh, man. I do love our bottoms.
I do love our bottoms as well.
So this month we read The Prince of Death by W.M. Fawkes and Sam Burns, mm-hmm. who we will actually be talking with here shortly.
Yes.
Yeah, so The Prince of Death is about the son of Hades, and...
Before we start this, we are going to be spoiling the shit out of it, and especially, I think with the interview, we're probably going to be dipping into some stuff that might spoil a lot of the story elements. So if you haven't read it and don't want to hear about things that happen in the story, you might want to skip this part, but... Hopefully you did read along with us so you can enjoy all the spoilers we're about to divulge in. So yes, the story is really fun. It is about Theodore Ward, who is a professor at a magical college who lost his mother recently. So by some weird twist of fate, he ends up with this crazy book that tells him how to get to the underworld by way of a subway station. He takes a train, essentially, to the underworld and stumbles into the son of Hades. His name is Lysandros, and then all this crazy shit happens. This was a really fun story, and I know that we actually ran into WM and Sam at GRL, and I think what made us gravitate to this book so hard, one, is that they're awesome, two, the artwork for it is gorgeous, and three, you were talking, and they were like, well, it does have a Halloween scene in it, and you're like, this is what we're reading.
Yes, man. And that was one of my highlights of the book, actually, was the Halloween party. It's a Halloween party in the underworld with all of the Greek gods in costume.
Yes.
Fucking great. And preceded, the scenes before that, leading up to that, was all of Persephone's and Hades' children carving pumpkins. And I don't know, it's just so much great Halloweenness for me. I adore that. So super, super fun with that.
I will say one of the highlights, and the whole book is great, but one of the highlights in the Halloween party is Dionysus being a fucking unicorn. you're supposed to love that character immediately because he's like the god of wine and parties and shit. But like, holy crap, I immediately was like, I want to go hang out with that man so bad.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed, just as far as characters are concerned, I know we've talked a lot about this before, about how there's not always a great representation of the female characters in a lot of MM romance, but Persephone was a badass, and I loved the daughters as well. So really cool representation of female characters in that were badass and fun. And I don't know, just cool. They weren't background characters. They were important. And I thought that was neat.
Yeah, it was really cool. And we could have a whole podcast episode about bad female characters in MM romance, but all of Lysanderos's sisters were so freaking cool. Like they stole the show a couple of times just for their being like amazing sisters and goddesses of death, essentially. Like, you can't top that. That's fucking rad. But yeah, the story itself was a lot of fun. I mean, it's always going to be a good time when you throw in like gothy death gods and nerdy magic professors and like the underworld and Greek gods and all this fuckery going on. It was really fun. The story that Lysanderos goes through when he's talking about Valeria and like what happened with her, like this, when he was talking about her jumping off the cliff, I was listening to the audio for it and like was like, oh shit, did she die? Did he just kill that little girl? Like, it was just like one of those jarring moments, but I was like, oh shit. And then him talking about like every time he brought her back, she would just like, because she was mortal and they're not supposed to be brought back, it like made her like drunk on battle and crazy and dying all the time. Like, it was fucking cool. Like, that's got to be one of the, I really enjoyed that part of the story.
Yeah, that was really gripping. I hadn't expected the tone to turn like that. I don't know why. It's an underworld. We're dealing with the god of death and we're dealing with a lot of dark themes, and that just really, it threw me off. There's a lot of really striking scenes, like when Lysanderos goes down and is, well, throwing himself a pity party, but staring at, is it Prometheus?
Yeah. I was like, I'm glad Hades swept in and was like, you're not supposed to be here. Like, we're going to go talk. Like, we need to fix the situation. Like, cause
you're being a little bit of a bitch.
I think if I was Prometheus, yeah, exactly. I would have been like, okay, we all had our heart broken, but this is goth even for you, my dear. Like, Jesus Christ.
Oh, don't goth. It's emo, honey.
I'm sorry. Sorry, my beloved gothy queen. It was very emo then.
It was very emo.
I've just upset you and like a huge chunk of our audience. Hopefully I can reel you back in. I love you all. It's emo. I apologize. But yeah, it was super fun. I adore Theodore and his awkwardness, and he's so cute. I just wanted to wrap him in a blanket so much. Like, they did a really good job making him such a good, smart character, but still a badass. Like, he didn't flinch away from anything. Like, I know that's one of the things that really drew Lysanderos to him, was the fact that he didn't, cower from he didn't back down from anything. He like faced death without a problem. He stood up to Zeus when he was in his face. Like, Theodore should not be this fearless, and he is. So he's fucking cool. Drinking a lot of coffee, can you tell?
Is that what that is?
Well, like, I really like this book, and then I just downed a bunch of coffee, and we're going to be talking to the author soon, and I'm just like, this is a fun night.
Well, due to the fact we don't know how much of this book we're going to dive into with the authors, I think we should go ahead and cut it off there so we kind of leave room to talk about it with them.
Yes.
You want to go ahead and jump into that interview?
Yes. So without any further ado, here's our interview with Sam and WM. So joining us on the podcast is the authors of our bottom pick for the month, W.M. Fawkes and Sam Burns. I'm going to read their bios one at a time, so we'll start with W.M. or Waverly. Waverly is an author of LGBTQ plus urban fantasy and paranormal romance. With co-author Sam Burns, she writes feisty Greek gods, men, and monsters, and the Lords of the Underworld series. She lives with her partner in a house owned by 3 Halloween-hued felines that dabble regularly in shadow walking. Sam lives in the Midwest with her husband and cat, which is even less exciting than it sounds, so she's not sure why you're even still reading this. She specializes in LGBTQIA plus fiction, usually with a romantic element. There's sometimes intrigue and violence, usually a little sex, and almost always some swearing in her work. Her writing is light and happy, though, so if you're looking for dark, gritty reality, you've come to the wrong author. Welcome, ladies.
Hi.
Hey.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
So we're going to dive right into the questions, and we start every interview the same. What got you both into romance?
Oh, that's a long story. I actually started way back in the day with fan fiction. I think that's a relatively common story, but I started into fan fiction way back, I want to say 2002, but that dates me. And then when I eventually found my way back to it, somebody said, "Oh, but have you read this book?" And the book in question was TJ Klune something. And that was when I found out that you could actually write these professionally. So I was like, okay, all in.
So if I may ask, what kind of fan fiction?
Oh, I banned a number of fandoms. I actually started out in Sailor Moon when I was very much younger, but most recently it was the Avengers.
Excellent. Are you a Stucky fan?
I am not. I had a weird ship, and everybody looked at me like I'm crazy. I shipped Frostar.
Oh, it's lovely having you on the podcast. No.
Loki and Iron Man.
I don't mind a little stuck. I came to romance directly through Stucky. No, I'm kidding. But it was also through fan fiction. I'm trying to remember what my original fandom was. I think probably Harry Potter. I mean, I was 11 when he was 11, and obviously Harry and I were soulmates, except for maybe Draco in the middle or something. I don't know. I can't speak to that. and kind of, dabbled a little bit, and I met some really cool authors who were writing romance, and I kind of got into the community that way, and that was, really cool. That's how Sam and I met. We were in a writing group, I don't know, 3 years ago.
Yes, we were in a Nanowrimo cabin for their camp in April.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, good connections there.
That's really awesome. I love that we keep finding more and more people that we've interviewed started with fan fiction, and I really honestly had no idea that that's where most people came from with this, and it's been a lot of fun kind of diving into that world.
It's a really interesting set of communities.
Yeah, people get really excited, and that's, you don't find that kind of pure enthusiasm for something in anywhere else. I'm not involved in any fan stuff right now, but good memories.
Yeah.
So the Lords of the Underworld series, which our book of the month, Prince of Death, is the beginning of that series, is all Greek mythology based, which is kind of almost its own kind of fan fiction if you think about it.
True.
So did either of y'all have a background in studying Greek mythology, or what kind of research was done to set all that up?
So, we're both huge nerds, and Sam's the kind of nerd who reads something and remembers it forever. And when I was in college, I studied history and religion. So obviously there's a lot of overlap with Greek mythology and classics. And I really like architecture, and, Pantheon's cool. So, that's kind of how I came around to it. Also, side note, I've always had a soft spot for Greek gods. When I was a kid, I raised chickens for a science experiment, and they were all named after the Pantheon. So,
oh my God, you've never told me that before.
Yeah, Hestia was my favorite.
Well, of course.
I didn't? Oh, God. Well, yeah, that also happened because I played Hestia in a play, so she was obviously my favorite of the little tiny chickens.
I love it.
So, I'm writing fan fiction about gods, I'm writing fan fiction about chickens, it's just alive for one of them. Yeah.
Yes, when we saw this question, I told Waverly, I think this is probably a question for you mostly, because my answer is middle school history class, and the fact that I'm a big enough nerd that I just read a lot of books.
Yeah. And, you see Greek mythology and all kinds of mythology come back over and over. I know there are a couple great series, even in romance, like Haley Turner's Soulbound series is great. And then
there's an Mpreg series too.
Yeah, there is. And the one with Ganymede that came out, I haven't read that one yet.
Oh, looks good. Wendy Rathbone?
Yes, that one.
Yeah,
there's a lot.
These are themes that come back over and over, and I think, historically, these are stories that continue to reverberate with people. And, when Sam and I started writing Lords of the Underworld, we wanted to take some kind of deeper cuts and maybe use gods or themes in a new way, or that you don't see a lot of. So in book 2, we get into Prometheus, and then in book 3 we have Thanatos. And, I have never read a book about Thanatos. I'm sure it's out there, but, we kind of wanted to give it a little bit of a new twist, or very
Well,
old
it's my
twist.
constant complaint. Yeah. No one ever writes romances about the death gods. Everybody's afraid of them. They're not villains.
And I appreciate y'all's twists on Hades and Persephone. When it got to that point, because it's like the myth of it is that, she's tricked into staying in the underworld and everything. But I love that you made her a character that chose her own destiny and made her strong.
Yeah, I think, that's something that we definitely, we didn't want to marginalize anyone or present women. I mean, in Greek mythology, women are often, kind of trod upon. Not all of them, but...
Well, Greek mythology was largely written by powerful old men.
Yeah, that. Sam's got it.
Waverly knows she had chicken. She's an expert.
I had chickens. That was my contribution. I sometimes thought they cuddled, and I was just like, wow, it's really cute that little chick Prometheus has a cuddle buddy. Probably needs everyone needs to know that.
Well,
that needs to be on something that I could advertise all the time.
I think that's a great idea.
So when I'm reading that second book, that's all I'm going to think about is a cuddly little chicken.
Little chickens. You're welcome.
Yes.
Oh, I love it.
That's awesome.
Okay, reeling us back in, otherwise we're just going to talk about chickens. So in y'all's story, there are different schools of magic, but something that I really enjoyed was how there's a lot of life and death and crossing those barriers through the story. So I have to ask, are there any schools of magic that humans can touch that dabble in life and death?
That's kind of an interesting question. I think the answer is not specifically, because life and death is sort of high concept in that, it's got a lot of moving parts. And the schools of magic are more, they're sort of like the food groups, and life and death is a really complicated dish. So it probably requires multiple schools moving together, probably multiple people working together.
Ooh, I
really like that analogy.
Yeah, I really like that too.
Me too. That was really awesome. Thanks for saying that, because I haven't thought about it that way. Yeah.
No, I read that and I was like, that's a really interesting question. How would I do that in this universe? Yeah. Because, the gods can affect things on a personal level. They just go, well, I want this person to be alive, therefore you're alive. But it's not quite as simple when you've got a human mage who, they're working from component parts.
Mm-hmm. And then, we do kind of have that in, the mythology. You have not Odysseus, what's his name? Orpheus, go back and get his wife, and that obviously goes poorly. So I think we had talked about, under certain contexts, in theory, yes, but he also had help from gods. It's not something that humans could just tap into.
Very cool.
So right now there's 3 books in this series. Are there plans for more? How many, have y'all planned on how many books for the Lords of the Underworld series?
Yes. So the Lords of the Underworld series is technically over, even though we're kind of leaving it open at the end because the story's not over. We're just moving into a different set of gods who aren't in the underworld, so calling it Lords of the Underworld is a little misplaced, I guess. So there are going to be 3 more books. We've played with the idea of a 4th, but really just 3 more books that feature Hermes is the next book. Hermes and Wilder Pratt is making a reappearance.
Oh, shit! Really?
Because we love a redemption story of a little asshole, and they're both kind of little assholes.
I was gonna say, it's an asshole and an asshole pairing that you don't get that very much.
They need that to be strong enough to withstand each other's assholery. They have to have built up their own for a while. We were talking about it because we were like, oh well, people are really gonna like Hermes and everybody loves a redemption story. Who can actually keep up with him? This entitled motherfucker.
Yeah, that guy's such a prick. Every time he showed up, I was like, that guy's a prick. That's the only thing I can think of. And a prick and an asshole. It works out great.
It does. I mean, it's what you need. So we're starting, that will be our first book in the Sons of Olympus series. So we'll deal with Hermes, and then Hephaestus gets a book because he is very sad and he deserves a hug more than almost anyone. Mm-hmm. And then we will probably round out that arc with Aries gets a book and everything kind of comes to fruition. So threads that we've started in Lords of the Underworld will all be tied up by the time we're finished with Aries' book.
Probably. She
That's
says
exciting.
because she knows I would not let her stop without doing an Aries book.
Was there an Aries chicken?
There was.
Aww.
There was. And a Zeus chicken. But I'm telling you, Hestia was my favorite. And she's one of my favorite characters. It's all because the chicken. It all goes back to the chicken. I think that should be my writer tagline. All goes back to the chicken.
This needs to be the name of the episode. It's just it all comes back to the chicken. No context. You got to listen to find out what we're talking about.
I love it.
Noted.
Can we ask what the co-writing process was like for both of you guys?
Absolutely.
Fun
Sam, do you want to
question.
go first?
I can do that. Honestly, the whole co-writing process is just so much communication. We talk about it as we're plotting every book back and forth every day. Okay, I'm working on this chapter today so that you can do the other thing tomorrow. And I tell you, if we were not able to be in constant contact with each other, I don't think we'd be able to do this.
Yeah, that's definitely been an enormous part of this. I mean, we started out as friends. We met a couple years ago. And then last GRL, so not this most recent one, but the one in Virginia, we kind of were like, we should actually write together. And I think that went alarmingly smoothly.
It did.
We had very open lines of communication. I've edited for Sam a little bit. And so, we had worked together and we were used to being blunt with each other, which is another, you have to trust the other person without getting offended every time they say, oh, I don't really like that chapter, which thankfully doesn't happen that often, but
My favorite story forever will be the fact that one day Waverly came to me and she was like, I really hate the direction this book is going. We need to delete the last 9 chapters.
Oh, we did, and we did. Yeah.
And we did it, and it worked out really well. I mean, the book got better for it. I can't really complain about it, considering the book improved.
But it was still a pain in the ass, and I felt so bad at the time. Because, you get into, sometimes when you're alone and you're writing a story, you get into it and you realize, oh, this really isn't working. But you go back and fix it, and that's just a decision you get to make on your own. But when you're co-writing, you have to consider, I'm asking Sam to do the past 5 days of work over again.
Yeah.
That's 5 days of Sam's life that I'm kind of co-opting. And, being willing to compromise is a huge thing. That she was able to take that in stride and not be like, oh my God, this is over.
Oh no, I was like, oh my God. But, at the same time, you have to remember that the book is more important than you going, oh, well, that's 5 days of my life I'll never get back. Well, yeah, but the next 5 days we'll fix it and you'll have a better book for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. But yeah, I can imagine you having to okay, how am I going to pitch this to where she's not okay, and we're done. And blocked.
I feel like I'm the one that gets really anxious and Sam's the one that's like, okay, this will be fine. I'm the one that's like, everything is broken. And she's like, it's really, really not.
I'm a pretty laid back person. It takes a lot to really upset me. So
yeah,
I suppose that probably helps.
It's a balance.
But I think it's been really easy. I know there are a number of people who co-write, but I mean, we just kind of came together and did it and there wasn't a lot of drama. And
Prince of Death really fell into place. We decided to write it in early November after GRL, and it was done by the end of the year. I mean, I think maybe we had a teeny bit left in January, but it was just done so fast.
Yeah. I mean, then when we were writing our most recent book, I mean, we plotted that out, or we divvied that out so that that one had many more points of view, but we were able to I write best during the day and she writes best at night. And, just everything felt kind of complimentary when we started writing together.
That's excellent.
We got really lucky.
Yeah, for sure. So if you guys wanted to go into a different genre that you could co-write together, which one would you like to tackle next?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That laugh.
We have so much planned. I mean, it's all fantasy and it's all romance at heart. But right now, gosh, what all do we have planned, Waverly? We're working on high fantasy, and we call Prince of Death and those books urban fantasy.
Nice.
And we have an idea that's, some cozy mysteries and
Ooh.
some magical realism.
Is this all
it's
MM?
very
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
Excellent.
So our high fantasy series is multi-point of view and kind of a full LGBT plus spectrum.
Mhm.
But most of our books kind of skew MM because that's where we cut our teeth.
Yeah, the high fantasy series is about half focused on the main couple, but there's a whole lot of other stuff going on that we felt like it would be a lesser story if we didn't also tell those points of view.
Yeah. But for the most part, yes, everything we write will be MM.
I don't see a lot of cozy mysteries in MM, and that's very cool. So I'm excited to hear that.
Well, we're going a little crazy because I don't know how much you guys read out of genre, but I'm a fan of Amanda M. Lee. And she writes these cozy witch mysteries that are MF, and they're just freaking adorable. And so that's kind of the vibe we're thinking about bringing to our cozy mysteries. So also paranormal, but cozy mysteries.
Ooh.
That was going to be my question, if it was also going to be a fantasy or paranormal kind of thing. That's awesome. That sounds right up my
I was about to
alley.
say that you are speaking Jess's language at this point.
Yeah, we really, I mean, why not put more magic in it?
Yes, that should
Exactly.
be your official tagline. Something with chickens, and then why not put more magic in it? Like, that's...
In the chickens. Got magic eggs.
Hey, there you go.
God. It's one of the stories I tell from college constantly that I have a creative writing degree. And it's from one of those universities that thinks quite a lot of itself as far as literature.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I took a class toward my degree, I turned in the first chapter of a high fantasy novel. And the very first piece of feedback written at the top of the page when it was returned to me was, but why does there have to be magic?
Wow.
And so I've sort of taken that. I mean, I stopped writing anything with magic in it for my degree, but after that, it was just like, you know what? There does have to be magic in everything.
I stand by that.
I agree. Yes. I'm notorious for like contemporary is okay, but give me everything else.
Yes.
Give me all of the magic and the paranormal and the fantasy. That's definitely where I'm just drawn.
I've kind of gotten to the point where it's like, okay, this story is great, but how can we add magic to it?
Yes.
I was really excited to see Lily Morton's new book, the Blue Billings book.
Mm-hmm.
That looks like my jam.
Yeah, it looks really
good. I downloaded it. I haven't started it yet, but I have that one. It's next up, I think.
Yeah.
I'm always a little excited when somebody I think of as contemporary puts out a fantasy book. I'm like, yes, come to the dark side.
Yes.
Join us.
And bring all your readers.
Yeah, no kidding.
So that's what's kind of on the back docket. But you guys started a new series, the Fire and Valor series. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So Fire and Valor is a high fantasy series. It's actually multi-point of view. And I think that it was kind of born out of that period. I mean, we had always talked about having a fantasy series and, you know, we really like dragons because who doesn't love dragons? Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of it was born out of that period of dissatisfaction after the end of Game of Thrones. So we had already been talking about it at that point. And then we were like, you know what? It kind of stinks that all the queer people died and it was super depressing and, you know, dragons maybe didn't come out super heroic at the end of it for unknown reasons because obviously dragons are the heroes of everything. So I think that, you know, for me, I had watched Game of Thrones sometimes enthusiastically and sometimes less enthusiastically. And I think that in some ways it's a response to the ways that failed, especially the LGBT plus community. So we do have like 7 points of view and we focus mainly on the central couple, Tristram, who is a dragon in hiding, and Bet Keiston, who is a half-elf assassin. And there's a lot of tension and political angst, but there's also, you know, other dragons and there's an FF couple who factor pretty heavily in shift the political tides in some pretty big ways towards the end. That's all I'll say about that.
This is where Waverly always has to stop me because I'm like, I want to spoil everyone.
I know, you made a graphic. She made a graphic that gives away the entire book, and I'm like, you can put that up in a year. She did, and it's very cute, and I can't wait for everyone to see it. But we gotta wait a little bit. Yeah, so I think in some ways it's a response to the way, I mean, not just Game of Thrones, but fantasy in general, kind of like high fantasy, doesn't always represent, with some, notable exceptions, but doesn't always represent queer communities and people. Yeah. And it certainly doesn't always give them happy endings. Yeah. Sam had not watched Game of Thrones, so do you have different take on that?
Well, I grew up on high fantasy. I was a huge high fantasy reader as a kid. Dragonlance, Robert Jordan, and pretty much anything with a dragon I could get my hands on. So while I wasn't quite as depressed by Game of Thrones, at the same time, I started seeing all of those dragons and the tons and tons of memes that were everywhere because of Game of Thrones. And it was like, well, maybe this is a good time to show everyone those dragons I've been hiding in the closet.
Yeah. Closet dragons. That's where I kept the chickens, too.
All goes back to the chickens.
Always.
It will.
Always comes back to the chicken. Well, that's excellent. And we definitely feel you on the Game of Thrones front. I mean, like, I wasn't always super into fantasy stuff. Jess is the one that actually pulled me into high fantasy things when we were working together. Jesus. How long have we been friends? A long-ass time. Like 11 years?
It's something like that.
Yeah. So, I don't know, like 8 years back or so, she brought the Game of Thrones book to me because I was talking about getting back into reading. She was like, here, start with this. And this is all her fault. So we got super into the show when it came out, and we chased that high forever. And then, of course, when it ended, we were on the same boat of like, what the hell just happened? So I'm so happy that you've taken that disappointment and crafted it into a great story that we can get into.
Me too. Yeah.
Actually, it was your banner at GRL for that series that drew me to you guys in the first place. Like I saw that and I was like, oh, we wanted to do something not contemporary. So I looked up all of your stuff and I was like, oh, this one looks spooky-ish. So because it was so close to Halloween, I aimed at the Prince of Death one. But yeah, now I can't fucking wait to read that. That sounds fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah. Our cover designer is Natasha Snow, and she's amazing. Yeah. Completely amazing. And I sleep with that banner every night. I'm just kidding.
You're not kidding. We know what's up.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for Waverly, I got to take the banner home with me because I was driving, so nice. It may or may not be up in my house now. Yeah, no.
Gotta look at it, man.
We had actually planned to use a different cover for those books, and then Natasha posted a spoiler of that cover, just the guy and the dragon in the background, and I was like, I do not care what the rest of that cover looks like. I wish to purchase it.
Yeah.
It took a while, but we eventually got there and got the covers, and yeah, those are really the perfect covers for that series.
Excellent.
Potential plug. Natasha has another pre-made sale coming up on November 29th.
Oh, lovely.
So, yeah, she's great. The end.
You guys have a lot of exciting stuff going on. Are there any specific upcoming projects that you guys wanted to pimp out while you're here?
Well, the one that Waverly has been telling everyone about, of course, is my personal project, the last book in the Rowan Harbor cycle, which is the 9th book, and it's been almost 2 years in coming. It'll be about a week short of 2 years when it comes out.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's been a really, really long road, and I think it's going to end up over 400,000 words in the series. So
I'm so excited, and I'm going to cry. I kind of know what happens, and I'm going to cry, and you're all also going to cry. So just get ready for that emotionally.
Well, I feel terrible, but I kind of hope everybody cries.
I think that means you're doing it right, honestly.
Yeah, that's the life of the author. I really hope everybody cries because of what I've done here. That seems healthy.
Yeah.
It's the mark of success.
Yes.
The tears of your reader.
Just collect them.
That's what gives you power.
Oh my God.
So when does that come out?
That is coming out on December 26th, 2019. That is our next book that's coming out. After that, we're the two of us going to be working on the second book in the Fire and Valor series.
Yes, so Prince of Dragon, and then soon after that, Wildfire, which is Hermes and Wilder Pratt's book. Hopefully will come out. And then we have another secret project. And, just myriad secret projects for the rest of time, moving into infinity. It'll be great.
Yeah, we only have the next dozen or so books planned out. It's nothing.
Excellent.
That's very exciting.
Well, thank you both for taking the time out of your evenings to come and chat with us. Like we had told you before, we had a great time reading y'all's books. So we couldn't wait to get to sit down and talk with you guys.
Thank you so much for having us. And I'm so glad you liked it and shared it with your readers. That's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam Burns and W.M. Fawkes, for joining us on the podcast today.
So next month, I guess we should let you guys know it's probably going to be a little light. I know that we did a light month for October as well because of GRL and everything like that. But since it's the holiday season and we are going to be pretty swamped with day job and family obligations, it's probably going to be pretty light, but we do have some fun stuff lined up. So make sure you join us for that. And of course, we'll make sure to put Sam and WM's links in the show notes so you guys can dive in and check out all of their goodies on their websites and Facebooks and all that goodness.
Absolutely. So we will see you guys at the top of December.
Yep. Until then.
Top to Bottom Podcast is a part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts.